Hello and welcome to a very special live episode of Buckeyes tomorrow morning for Saturday, November 30th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The game against Michigan is today. It's the only day all year that I really don't even have to think about it. I know what day the Michigan game is. I know how many days there are coming to it. We are just hours away from kickoff of the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Michigan Wolverines, joined by Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, this is the day we spend all year counting down to. I haven't even looked yet. I will have to look tomorrow to figure out, okay, how many days is it till the next Ohio State Michigan game? But man, oh man, it's after saying 360 whatever last year, it's nice that it is finally here.
Tom, you say you'll have to look tomorrow. Don't you mean today?
Well, that's the show that's for Sunday. So no, that'd be tomorrow, Tony.
Yeah, it after the game is done, and then you're like, 360 or whatever, and it's like, wow, that seems like forever. But it seems like yesterday we were in Ann Arbor and preparing for that game and picking against the Buckeyes in that game and getting some grief for it. But I don't I don't keep accounts of things like that. Like I don't remember stuff like that. I just let it brush over me and I move on. The hurtful words, the hateful comments doesn't bother me.
Yeah, it's and we're there are people out there who feel like you need to be stroked and petted and told that everything is going to be great at all times, and that's not what we do. If you want that, that's out there. But if we think Ohio State's going to lose, we'll tell you we think Ohio State's going to lose. If we think that there's something wrong, we'll tell you there's something wrong. If we think that something's right, we'll tell you something's right. And hopefully, by this point, you have figured out like, hey, well, we'll shoot you straight, and sometimes we're right, and sometimes we're wrong. But we'll always tell you what we think. Tony, I feel like neither of us is going to pick against Ohio State this year. I think that this might be a year when the Buckeyes set things back, headed in their direction.
Well, the Buckeyes are 10-1 this year when I picked them to win. So, you know, they're doing well enough. And at this point, there's no reason to pick them to lose this game other than fear and loathing in Columbus, basically. And we've both experienced upset wins by Michigan in this series. But as we'll talk about throughout the show, so many things would have to happen for that to happen. I'm not saying it can't because we know crazy things happen in this series, but it would take more than one crazy thing. It would take several crazy things to happen and then to capitalize on those things. So, yeah, we've already got our staff picks out there, so you can check that out at BuckeyeHuddle.com.
Yeah, and we'll run through those probably later in the show. But one of the things that would have to go right for Michigan in order to pick up an upset here is you probably have to not have two of your best players out. And right now it's at least safe to say that the status of Will Johnson, cornerback, and Colston Loveland, tight end, is up in the air. There have been reports from people who generally are right about this kind of things, including Pete Thamel, that Will Johnson is out for the year. That's a turf toe thing, and that's not. I've seen people calling it a stub toe. Like, no, that's not what it means at all. Turf toe is actually pretty painful and has caused a number of players to be out for an extended period of time. So, Will Johnson is not ducking Jeremiah Smith if he's not out with a hangnail. Like, if he misses the game, it's a fairly substantial injury. Loveland is a different issue. We don't have that in a reportable format, but we have a sense for what the injury is, and his status might be a little more legitimately up in the air right now. There was someone on our board who put out what we had been hearing. So if you want to go find out what we're hearing, or one of our members threw that out there as a on a thread on our board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. But Tony, if Colston Loveland doesn't go, how much, to Austin's question here, how much is that point differential worth for them to not have Will Johnson and not have Colston Loveland in that game?
Well, and people think of Colston Loveland as, this All-American tight end, but he's also their best outside wide receiver. And that's where they would use him a lot, is matched up outside, like an X receiver, and use him to move the chains. And without him, they've lost if he's not playing or he's not 100% or what have you, like, he is their best wide receiver. He is also their best tight end. He is their best passing threat. So when he is out there, you're able to then use Marlon Klein at tight end, who's a very good tight end in his own right. When he's not, then you lose that ability to have, I don't want to say a mismatch against a corner, but maybe a favorable matchup or a matchup that you can win against a corner because their other receivers aren't that. They don't have his size, his strength, the maybe the fear factor that he provides. So if he's not able to go, that's a huge loss. But even if he's not there, it's still a short passing game. So it still comes down to tackling and covering. And we saw how Ohio State's defensive line got after Curtis Rourke last week. Do you expect Michigan to hold the ball as long as Curtis Rourke did? Because they don't even look downfield, Michigan.
No, they don't. It is a get the ball out quickly kind of thing. And so I don't know that I'm expecting a ton of sacks. I'm expecting Buckeyes in the backfield, and I think that might be an issue in the run game to a certain degree more than in the pass game. If I don't know if Ohio State picks up a bunch of sacks, that's obviously good news for the Buckeyes. If the Buckeyes don't pick up a bunch of sacks, I don't know that tells me anything other than Michigan's getting the ball out. It just doesn't feel like it feels like how many passes. I mean, you've been charting it all year. I mean, what percentage? And you don't have to have the exact number, but it feels like 50% of Davis Warren's passes have been behind the line of scrimmage, and another about 30% have been about 3 yards downfield. Like this is not an offense that relies on double moves. It's just if they're going to take a shot downfield, they'll run a flea flicker or something. It's just not that complicated.
How often do we even see them just drop back and throw deep? You don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would expect to see it this week just because you need to change up some tendencies. But Tom, I don't know if you saw this, and I don't know if anybody else saw this because I was tweeting about Michigan's sack numbers offensively. So I tweeted this last night, and I think I wrote it on the board, or I also posted it on Twitter. But so Michigan has been sacked. Their quarterbacks have been sacked 15 times this season. On those, 2 of those sacks came on the same drive against Illinois. Of those 14 drives, Michigan scored 1 touchdown. So, and that came against Arkansas State.
Mm-hmm.
So they've only scored 3 points on, I think, let me see here, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think 12 sacks against Power 4 opponents. They've scored 3 points, and that was the 56-yard field goal last week against Northwestern on a drive where they have given up a sack. And they've only converted 2 first downs on drives where they've given up a sack against Power 4 opponents. And both of those came on the same drive against Illinois, in a drive that ended in an interception. So if they can get to Davis Warren, that's it. That's the end of the drive, because they can't, it's hard enough for them to get 10 yards on 3 plays. For them to have to get 16, that's a bridge too far. And then especially, most of these are either third down or first down. And so the first down sacks, they've got a little bit more time to get it done. But man, if you get to Davis Warren, this offense is done.
Yeah. If you get Michigan off schedule, they are really in trouble, because the run game relies on just sort of hammering it ahead at 3 yards a pop. And if they break a tackle, if you can, if you get someone who misses a tackle, then sometimes you can turn 3 yards into 15 or 6 yards into 30 or something like that. And you're going to need, for Michigan to move the ball, they're going to need Ohio State to miss tackles. They're going to need some of those 3-yard runs to turn into 12-yard runs, and the 6-yard runs to turn into 35-yard runs, because they don't have the passing game to be able to just sort of methodically go down the field. They don't complete 80% of their passes like Will Howard does more or less every game. It's very, very hit or miss. And if you get Davis Warren where he's got to throw the ball downfield, he misses high a lot. Those are balls that get tipped. Those are balls that get picked off. That hasn't necessarily happened a lot against them this season, but generally, if you're throwing the ball down the middle and it gets tipped, that's a ball where everyone in the stadium is holding their breath. So you're setting yourself up for big trouble. You get pressure on him. He throws off his back foot. He doesn't step into it. A lot of those balls sail high. There's just a lot of bad things. The old Woody Hayes 3 things that can happen when you throw the ball and 2 of them are bad. That's especially true for Michigan. And the third thing is generally they complete it 3 yards downfield, and then maybe something good happens after that, but not necessarily.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of. I mean, it's mostly yards after the catch, but even then, it's still not a lot of yards after the catch. And just the idea of stepping up and throwing 25 yards downfield on a deep end or anything like that. It's just not what they do. The longest throws of the season have generally been on scramble plays where routes are being broken off, and then Davis Warren or Jack Tuttle back in the day would find somebody open downfield, and that's where they would get some big chunks. So, I don't see that. That's possible for sure because Davis Warren can escape a little bit, but it comes down to the defense being very, very uh, disciplined. And if they're disciplined, then I think they should be able to handle the play after the play. Basically, once things break down, just be ready for that. Tom, I think you're muted now, like completely.
How about now? Is that better? Can you hear me
It's a
now?
little better. Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to change it. People in the comments are talking about the volume being low,
Mm.
but we have all the usual settings, so it should be as usual. I tried to change something, and then now I tried to change something, and it didn't work. So sorry. Turn up your speakers. I do not have another solution for you. We should be on exactly the same settings as we always are. So, um, Mike Ferguson. Oh boy. Hang on. Yeah, there we go. So there we go. So all right. So Jordan and Mike both appreciate it. All right. So there you go. Thank you, valued listeners. We appreciate it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the Ohio State run game because I feel like the Ohio State run game, what they're able to do in terms of the offensive line is going to be the single biggest determinant in terms of what that game, what comes out. The battle between the Ohio State offensive line, the Michigan defensive line, that feels like that's going to be the single biggest determinant in terms of is this a big Ohio State win, a small Ohio State win, or a Michigan win? So much of that comes down to can Ohio State run the ball enough? 3.5, 4 yards a carry.
Mhm.
Can Ohio State pass protect Will Howard enough to let him get the ball out? Because Ohio State doesn't want to just dink and dunk and have Will Howard get the ball out in a second and a half. They want to run some stuff, at least mid range. You're not bombs away all the time, but they want to be able to use that effective mid range passing game. So much of that comes down not to how the Michigan defensive backs match up against the Ohio State wide receivers, but how the Michigan defensive linemen match up against the Ohio State offensive linemen.
Yeah, and I would expect it to be slow growing early on, and then maybe Ohio State grows and grows and grows over the course of the game, where maybe what you're doing in the second half is a yard better, a yard or two better than what you did in the first half. And your adjustments that you make at halftime for the third quarter start showing more and more. I just wonder if at the start of the game, they're just going to see how soft is this Michigan middle. And I'll be like, I don't think it's going to be soft. So you might want to try not to do that. And, unless you're looking to get some punting action going, you might want to stay away from between the tackle stuff against the defensive front there. But if if Michigan does have trouble stopping the run, and I keep going back to the 3-game stretch against like Oregon and Michigan State and Illinois, where Michigan gave up about 175 yards rushing a game. If Ohio State's at 175 yards, that's what they've been in the few games recently where they've run the ball well enough and the possessions have been shorter and the number of snaps have been lower. So I'm not expecting like a 250-yard day would require so many carries. They almost wouldn't have enough. They barely have enough snaps to do that if they ran it just every single time. So 175 yards, if they can do that, and that's the 4.5, 5 yards a carry, I think that's a comfortable win for them. But yeah, I still think I'm expecting at least one big hit in there from a Travion Henderson to maybe fudge some of those numbers. But it's all of the other numbers. It's the other 27 carries. Are you getting 54 yards out of them, or are you getting 120?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, what is the median carry? The
Mhm.
average, when you talk about the average, everyone always talks about the mean, which is just take them all and divide them up by the number of carries. That's can be skewed by the 150-yarder or whatever it is. If the median number, which is just the middle number in there, if that's a 3, if the median number is a 3 and they're getting 3 or more on half of their carries, they're probably in pretty decent shape. That's not a number that we typically get in the box score, but we could calculate that after if we want to. But yeah, it's a spot where if it's just consistency, it's just can they stay on schedule? Staying on schedule is just get 4 yards on first down, get half of what you need on second down, and get it on third down. If you just stay on schedule, then you're probably fine. You're probably you're probably moving the chains because Ohio State doesn't have to do it all on the ground. They have to do enough on the ground to hold Michigan honest, to keep Michigan honest. If Michigan has to run the ball on the ground because they can't consistently throw the ball, Michigan has to be able to run the ball. Ohio State could win the game without running the ball. That is not typically how these games have gone, but typically, if Ohio State is just running a little bit, they can hit the big plays through the air because I don't think they need to get, this is not a game where you need to get 40 points. I don't know that this is a game where you need to get 30 points to win.
Mm.
What's the magic number in your mind, Tony? Do they have to get 21, 24, 28, 31? Like what's the number where if all I tell you is this is Ohio State's final score, you go, I bet they won.
I'd say 21 would be a 4 or 5 point win in there. I would feel comfortable that Michigan isn't going to score 3 touchdowns in this game. They would require a lot of help. So a lot of this is just Ohio State first doing no harm to themselves and doing what they can. And there will be mistakes, but both teams will make mistakes in this one. Ohio State just can't help Michigan along. If Michigan gets no help, as I've been saying all season long, they will lose. And if Ohio State does not help them in this one, they will lose badly. So how much does Ohio State help them? How many short fields? They scored 50 points last week. Only one of those drives against Northwestern for Michigan was over 65 yards. So make them move the ball 75 yards, and you'll find out that it's not that easy for them. Will Michigan move the ball 75 yards on their first drive? Maybe. It tends to happen against this Ohio State defense. Will they move the ball 75 yards for the next 8 drives total? Perhaps. I mean, we've seen that as well also, where things get shut down once that script runs out for the opponent, and then they have to react on the fly and deal with what Ohio State's doing, and Ohio State starts to dictate stuff. It gets a lot more difficult for offenses. So, yeah, I think if Michigan can get out to a fast start, but then they have to withstand it. We saw Penn State get out to a fast start, 10-0 at home, and couldn't hold it. What was it? Was it 2018, 2017, 2018 when Michigan got out to a 14-0 start in this game and couldn't hold on to it? So 2017, maybe.
What year was that? Yeah, 2017. It might have been 2017. Can you hear me, by the way?
I got you.
Okay. All right.
You sound a little bit better. Is Tom better, everybody? Now you're muted.
All right. Well, this is what you got. So hopefully it works because that's it. I'm not changing it anymore. So hopefully this works better for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you have seen Ohio State. Michigan. If Michigan falls behind 14-0, game is over. Drive home safe. If Ohio State is down 14-0, they've done it before on the road. They've been, they were, like as you said, down 10 at Penn State, and they were down 10 at Penn State. And it was 14-10 Ohio State before you could blink. They just were right back. It was just, all right, well, that was unfortunate. And now you're back on top. And then that was really functionally it for the game for the most part. So yeah, 14-0 in 2017. There you go. So yeah. And that was a game where Ohio State had lost its quarterback. That was, I think that's one of the more forgotten Ohio State games because 2016, you have the double overtime, and 2018, you have the 62 points and the Chris Olave punt block and all that kind of stuff. 2017 was just kind of like, and also they won that year. And it was a year where it wasn't a particularly great game, but it was one of those games where Ohio State just sort of grounded out and won on the road. So that's a, certainly a possibility that we will see Ohio State having to come back tomorrow, but I very much doubt that Michigan is going to be able to dig out of a hole without a defensive score, a special team score, or something like that. It's funny. We talked about special teams like 3 weeks ago as it's a shame Ohio State doesn't even try on special teams anymore and hasn't for multiple years because you just haven't seen anything positive on special teams for years and years and years. And then they block a punt they blocked a punt against Purdue. And then they had a dropped snap, which they turned into a block punt against Northwestern. And then they had another drop snap, which they turned into a big tackle for loss against Indiana last week. Yeah. So you have 3 straight weeks in which they've given the offense the ball inside the did they score a touchdown on the block punt against Purdue, or did they set themselves up with a short field? But
either way, the one that was out at the one.
No, that was the one at Northwestern. Northwestern was the one that was out at the one. I don't remember. They might have scored a touchdown against Purdue, but either way, it's you've all of a sudden had 3 enormous plays on special teams, and you also had the Caleb Downs punt return for a touchdown. We've seen special teams swing games in this series before. Is that something you're looking for tomorrow?
Well, we saw Chris Olave do it in 2018 as a true freshman, blocking a punt. We remember the 2 touchdown catches, but getting that punt block in there, I think that's another way that Michigan could make an impact in this one. The percentage of when you block a punt and score on it is like 90% win percentage. So if Michigan wants to even things out, that would be one way to get it done. Will we see some fake punts that we have seen or attempted to see in this series that would have perhaps changed some things? That with Michigan already securing bowl bid, there's nothing that they can't do that should surprise anybody. Mm-hmm. They should pull out every single stop that they have, go all guns blazing at all times, and see what happens. It should just be whatever they've got, whatever they thought, let's try this. Every single napkin play that they've drawn up, they should be looking at this week and saying, what would Ohio State not expect? Because what you can't do is just do what you've been doing all year long, because that's not good enough and it won't be good enough. You need more. You need something different. You need the element of surprise. We talk about, what wrinkles are they saving? This game needs to be entirely wrinkles for Michigan. This needs to be a fat, fluffy, wrinkled dog that is just all wrinkles. And then maybe, boom, here comes Kalel Mullings for 60 yards.
Yeah, this is a game where every time Michigan lines up for a kickoff, you have to assume it's going to be an onside kick attempt, like what Oregon did. Just try and steal a possession in the middle of the game somewhere. Every time Michigan lines up for a punt, you have to assume it's going to be a fake punt. The only thing I wouldn't expect is Dominic Zavada, Michigan's field goal kicker, is so good he's automatic from basically anywhere inside of about 55. So that's the only place I wouldn't necessarily expect it, which means, therefore, if they're supposed to do it where no one's expecting it, well, then maybe it is going to be a fake field goal. It just feels like this is a kitchen sink game, because what do they have left this season? You're going to play in a who cares bowl game sponsored by nobody.biz. And that's, so if they win that game, great, whatever. That doesn't have any impact on them at all. I think back to the 2013 season where Michigan plays Ohio State and runs the most telegraphed 2-point conversion play to try and win the game in the final minute. And they, gets picked off by Tyvis Powell to seal a 1-point win for Ohio State. And then Michigan in their bowl game, which was the Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl, it's like the junior varsity Fiesta Bowl, which later was the Cheez-It Bowl. And now is the Arizona Bowl or something. It's the one that's played in the Diamondback Stadium. And they were playing Kansas State, and they were down like 38-7 or something in the fourth quarter of that bowl game. And they ran, it was like the Philly special or something on a 2-point conversion when they had scored to make it like 38-13 in the final minute of a Buffalo Wild Wings Bowl. And they ran the Philly special then. Like, it doesn't do you any good to save it for then. Like, you throw it all out against Ohio State this weekend, and what's the worst thing that happens? You're going to lose by 3 touchdowns if it doesn't work. So guess what? If you don't do it and you just try and play it straight up, you're probably going to lose by about 3 touchdowns to Ohio State this weekend. So you might as well shoot your shot and, take the proverbial puncher's chance.
Ohio State was favored by 16 in that game, by the way, in
2013.
2013, yeah. And it went down to the final score. And that one was a shootout. Devin Gardner threw for almost 400 yards or so, and was an unstoppable force in that game after being very stoppable against other defenses that year. But yeah, that one was an interesting one. I don't know how often Urban actually covered against Michigan, because they didn't do it in 2014 either, when they were 21-point favorites. And Won by
Didn't they win
14,
42? Didn't they win 42-20? Oh, was it 42-28 that year?
42-28.
14?
And
Okay.
both of those games, 13 and 14, the games were tied at the half.
Hmm.
Ohio in 2012, Michigan was up, I believe, 21-20 at the half. 2015, Ohio State was up 14-10 at the half, won 42-13. 2016, Ohio State was down 10-7 at the half.
Hmm.
2017 was 14-14 at the half. 2018 was 24-19 at the half for the Buckeyes. 2019, Ryan Day finally steps in, is like, Urban, I'm going to show you how to win comfortably at the half. 28-16 at the half. And then, of course, 2020 at the half, Michigan was having donuts and coffee. 2021, 2021, Ohio State trailed 14-13 at the half. 2022, Ohio State led 20-17 at the half. And then last year, Ohio State trailed 14-10 at the half. Only once in the last 10 plus years has this been more than a one-score game at the half. So I don't care what Ohio State is favored by. They've been favored by a bunch before, and it doesn't seem to matter in the first half, and sometimes it doesn't matter in the second half. So if this is 13-10 at the half tomorrow, one way or the other, or 13-13, that's the way it goes, man.
Yeah, it's funny because it doesn't feel like that because there's been a bunch of years when they've won by a million. I mean, 2018 was the year that they had. It was like they gave up 2 scores in like 8 seconds or something like that. Right at the end of the first half, Michigan scored a touchdown, and then was it DeMario Recall muffed a kickoff or something like that, and Michigan immediately got the ball and scored again. It was like Ohio State had dominated the first half, and then Michigan scored 14 points in 10 seconds or something like that. And it was just like, oh boy, here we go again. Because that was the year, that was a good Michigan team. Everyone now looks back and goes, that was the Michigan team that gave up 62 to Ohio State. It was like, yeah. But up until that point, it was, boy, this Michigan team is really good. Boy, this Michigan team is thumping everyone. This team's the real deal. And Ohio State gets out to a huge lead in the first half, and then just craps it away in the span of 15 seconds. And it was like, oh boy. And then they had plenty more for the second half, so it worked out okay. But yeah, 2022, I go back to 2022. There were moments where it looked like Ohio State was going to run Michigan out of the stadium in the first half, and it just never quite happened. And, there's some context around that game that we were not aware of at the time, but it was one of those, boy, if you have a chance to step on someone's throat, you should step on their throat to put them, put the game away and not leave it into the second half. But well, that's some interesting context there for folks. So maybe if it is a game into the second half, maybe this is just kind of how these games go. Hang on, I had a couple of things I wanted to get to real quick.
Can I tell you real quick?
Uh-huh.
At that 2022 game, Ohio State had 315 yards of total offense at the half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were going up and down the field on Michigan, and then the second half, it was like a switch flipped, and yeah, they had 300 yards of total offense in the first half. How many points did they have? 20?
20.
I mean, yeah, that was one where it felt like they could have had 28 or 31 or something like that, and they didn't. And it was like, well, they're still winning. So as long as nothing changes in the second half, and then something changed in the second half. So that was, we have seen missed opportunities overcome, and we have seen missed opportunities come back to haunt you in this series over the years. Jordan Kapler says, Tony, can you do me a favor and hide Tom's gloves for tomorrow? Let me tell you, friends, I was just outside. I just took the dog to go run around a little bit. And I just went outside in a sweatshirt. I was outside for maybe 20 minutes or so. Let me tell you, it is brisk outside right now. I am not someone who gets cold very easily. And I did not have gloves on. I didn't have a hat on. I was cold after about 20 minutes. And it was the real field temperature is something like 20 degrees right now, like the wind chill, where, it's snowing just a little bit, but it's 30 maybe degrees, high 20s, and some wind. And boy, it is cold. And this is about what it's supposed to be about this time tomorrow. So the morning real field temperature, I looked by the time we're looking at getting to the stadium on Saturday morning, Tony, the real field temperature is 9 degrees, and it's going to get all the way up to about 24 during the end of the game. So it's going to be cold. So yes, wear layers if you're going to the game, gloves, Those little hand warmers would probably be a good idea. Throw a couple in your shoes. You don't need to worry about it, Tony. You'll be at the nice toasty press box. But for those of us toughing it out in the elements, Tony, it's going to be it might be a multiple pair of gloves day.
They might try to crack the window, so I might need some hand warmers. If you have any spare gloves or spare, I did go around like, where are my gloves? Where is my stocking hat? And so I did find everything, and I'll have my spring jacket and my fall jacket, and I'll combine them into my winter coat, and I will be cold, but walking from the car to the stadium, I should manage. And if I don't, remember me.
It's not that far of a walk.
How often have we seen any of was Will Howard worn gloves yet this year? And I should go back and look at the game last year. Did he wear gloves in the Iowa State game and that snow game?
That I don't remember. It hasn't been that cold at any of these games. I mean, last weekend, a lot of people were wearing coats down on the sideline. Like, someone looked at me and go, aren't you cold? And I just had a t-shirt and a sweatshirt on, and it was like, it's fine. I wasn't that. It was probably 40, something like that. This is going to be the coldest it's been in Columbus all season. And that's, this is a temperature that feels completely fine in February once you're sort of acclimated to it. When you're not, it's going to feel pretty chilly. It's this is probably going to be the coldest Ohio State Michigan game, probably, just because last year it was cold, but it was sunny, so it warmed up during the course of the game. It was, it was in the 20s in the morning, I remember, but this is going to be overcast and probably a little bit of breeze, not gale force winds or anything, but it's going to be cold enough that it'll probably impact some things in the passing game at least a little bit. Probably won't feel great to get hit either.
No gloves for Will Howard, as I'm
all right
looking at the game last year in the snow about a year ago today. No gloves, all bare hands. He's fine. Short sleeves. It's snowing. It's cold. He did okay.
Warpug says bets on whether there will be Buckeye fans with no shirts on. That Vegas has taken that one off the board. The answer is obviously yes. Not even a question.
0 points for that bold prediction. These are still college kids, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Act like you've been there.
Robert Howard says, wait, you'll be my prayers, Tony. Way to be a hero for your loyal viewers. Listen, if there's a little bit of a breeze coming through, it's only going to average out the fact they've got the heaters cranked a little too hot. They'll probably cut into nap time a little bit in the press box, but that's it. That's
well, and here's the thing, with the smoothies, is it going to be too cold for a smoothie? And I'm not a coffee person, so an iced drink will make things even colder. So then, you got to think, what should I do here? What should I do here? And then you just, maybe I'll put a coat on and have a Diet Coke.
That sounds wonderfully refreshing. Yes, and there was a question. Halvor wants to know, wasn't 2018 the revenge tour? Yes, it was. It was until it wasn't. That was definitely the narrative coming in. And I remember doing pregame shows about that. And boy, this Michigan team, and can Ohio State hold them off? And then it was just that was a decided schematic advantage game for Ohio State, no question, where Don Brown wanted to blitz and play man coverage, and Ohio State went, okay, let me introduce you to my friend Mesh. And they lived happily ever after. Here's an interesting one from Robert. Prediction: Michigan will attempt a forward pass with 4 different players, barely forward, but forward. So a forward pass with 4 different players. Now that to me, Davis Warren's a given.
Yep.
Alex Orji's almost certainly a given. I got one running back. Getting to another one, we've seen
double pass.
Mullins throw. Yeah, well, the double pass, only one can be forward, so only one is going to be only one would get there.
But I'm saying, don't look for another running back to do it. Look for one of the receivers, because they throw those some wide screens. Maybe then they'll try to mask it that way. So, that's a pretty good one. I like that one, and it wouldn't. I mean, I don't know how often you have to go back to see four quarterbacks throw a pass in a game for Michigan. I think I did this a while back for Ohio State in terms of maybe touchdown passes in a season, 4 quarterbacks, and you had to go back to like the 50s, but 4 guys throwing a pass forward. You could see 2 quarterbacks. If it doesn't happen, I will be surprised. If Donovan Edwards or Kalel Mullings throws a pass, they've done it before. That won't be a surprise. I think the biggest surprise would be the double pass. And since that is the one thing they haven't really done, then maybe that's the
Mhm.
one that we should expect most, Tom, other than, of course, Davis Warren.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
frankly, that might be their best shot for a downfield pass.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. You try and get the defense to suck up and then take a shot downfield. The throw, the throws downfield have just not been there in terms of arm strength, in terms of arm accuracy, in terms of receivers being able to get open. So if you can get a guy wide open because the defense has sucked up on a what looks like a screen pass or what looks like an end around or something like that, that's not a bad not a bad way to kind of work around that. Glasswing Butterfly wants to know the temperature difference at field level when it's about 32 degrees out, because when it was 95 out, it was 120 or something. I think it was 140 something on the Big Ten Network said for the Marshall game. So the temperature difference on the field is really not substantial from where it is elsewhere on the field or outside the stadium. The only thing that really makes a difference at field level is because the stadium's relatively tall and closed in, you don't get as much wind at field level as you do if you were sitting in the top row of D deck or standing outside next to the stadium, standing outside in a field or whatever near there. Temperature wise, it doesn't make that much of a difference. The reason it is a big difference on a sunny, hot day is because the sun beats down and there's all that's between those little pieces of fake grass on the field. It's all chopped up old tires. So it's all black. So it all absorbs a ton of heat from the sun. So what happens is during a hot day, a hot sunny day, there's a huge difference between the temperature of if you're standing in a field half a mile from the stadium and standing on the field on that artificial turf. It makes a huge difference on a hot day when you don't want it to make a huge difference. It really doesn't make a particularly big difference on a day like Saturday, where I think it was supposed to be mostly overcast, which means you're not going to get a lot of sun beating down. Also, the sun is much lower in the sky. It's come up much later in the morning because we're much later in the fall. All of that adds up to no, there's not a huge temperature difference. Unfortunately for me and a lot of other people down on the field, there is not a huge temperature difference on the field when you get to this time of year.
Also, not a big temperature difference in the press box, where in the summer, these noon kicks are hot and blinding in the press box. I've tried to explain this to people before. It's not, you can't work in these conditions. You can't see your screen. The sun comes through the windows like a magnifying glass almost. It's too hot in September. It's dangerous, frankly, these conditions that they put us in. But it's just fine when it's overcast and you get into the winter or
I can't believe
fall.
I can't believe you made it all the way through that answer without using the word hero. I mean, I thought for sure here it comes, but no.
That's not for me to say. That's for everybody else to recognize me for being a hero. Am I going to say I'm a hero? No. Do I have to? No. It's understood.
Strongly implied. Yes. Yes, it is. Glasswing Butterfly says, thanks, Tom. Good luck. I feel worst of all for Tony, of course. Listen, we all do. We all do.
I will. I hope to manage.
GOJ says, weather means nothing in this game. Tough man, trench game. It's our moment, our time. Go Bucks. I mean, this is not weather that should substantially impact things. This is not 80-mile-an-hour winds like we saw at Northwestern a couple of years ago. This is not, this is not snowing sideways. This is not pouring down rain. This is mildly inconvenient Midwestern weather, which is kind of normal for this time of year. And frankly, unless something really shocking happens, this will, or, if Ohio State loses in the Big Ten championship game, yes, they will play one more weather game this year. Outside of that, they're probably done with weather games after this, because you're playing in a dome in Indianapolis next week, assuming they win. And then you're either playing a home game in Columbus or you're playing your next game in the Rose Bowl after that. Mm-hmm. So, and then the semifinals are in Miami, which is, warm-ish, but it could potentially rain there, and Dallas, and then the championship game is indoors in Atlanta. So, outside of if they handle their business the next 2 weeks, the only chance for a weather game after that, it doesn't really rain in Pasadena, and it doesn't really rain in it doesn't. The only other place it could rain is in the Orange Bowl, and I don't know that they would even necessarily be in there. I haven't done the mileage calculation between Cotton Bowl and Orange Bowl. I would guess they would probably. I mean, it may determine on who be determined on who is in their half of the bracket. If Ohio State's the number one and Texas is the number, on their side of the bracket, they may put Ohio State in the Orange Bowl. Or if Miami's in their half of the bracket, they may keep Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. Well, there's a lot of factors that go into there that we don't know yet. All right, so here's one, and I wanted to address this because Sam asked, does Buckeye Huddle cover basketball anymore? Kind of a big game today against Pitt. So here's how coverage decisions get made. What are people watching? What are people talking about? What are people reading? What do you think people are talking about and reading and watching in Columbus, Ohio this week? Like, kind of a big basketball game, and the Ohio State-Michigan game is tomorrow. Like, if you want us to cover basketball, tell 5,000 of your friends to watch when we do a basketball show, because we see how many people watch when we do a basketball show, and we see how many people we can do a big basketball game recap, or we can do here's a 2026 quarterback who might be interested in Ohio State, and we see what the numbers are. So,
well, Ohio State trailing 9-7 in the first half. I will say, in terms of football coverage versus basketball coverage, I was on Mark Rogers' show Wednesday, and a Michigan podcaster who has his own channel on Mark Rogers' network there. They did an 11-hour stream after Bryce Underwood committed because because people just wanted to keep talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we're dealing with in terms of football versus basketball. And the running joke with college basketball is it doesn't start until January for the majority of people. And the majority of people doesn't start until March, but in terms of like the ramped up coverage, it doesn't start until after football season. So, so that's why, plus in terms of like, why am I not at the basketball game right now? I've got too much football stuff to do today. Sorry.
Yeah. It's just that, it's not like, oh, well, we have something against Jake Diebler. It's just like, no, this is determined by the audience. So those are the decisions that get made. I would love to go cover more hockey. I would love to go cover more hockey in the fall. Men's hockey, women's hockey, men's basketball, women's basketball. Absolutely. I would absolutely love to do it. It's football season in Columbus, Ohio until further notice. And following this weekend and next weekend, it will be football season in Columbus, Ohio until Ohio State loses another game. And then it will probably be football season for another week or so after that, win or lose in that last game. And there will be lots of talking about that. And then, don't worry, there's plenty of basketball season still to come. The other thing that doesn't help basketball is outside of this game, the home non-conference schedule is awful. Play some good non-conference home games, and you have a better chance of having more interest. All their interesting games, other than this one, all of their interesting games in non-conference are on the road or neutral site this season. So,
Tom, football update for you. Wisconsin is in the red zone now. They're trailing 21-7 and early in the fourth against Minnesota, trying to make this one interesting for Paul Bunyan's Axe after Minnesota got out to a 21-0 lead against Luke Fickell's guys.
Well, McChicken says we need a 12-hour Buckeye Huddle live stream. We have done extended live streams in the past.
We did a 6-hour one.
I was going to say, I think 6 hours is the longest we've done. We did a early signing day live stream a couple of years ago.
That was about 8, I think 8 total.
Yeah, that was 6 or 8 hours, and we kind of had different people popping in and out during the course of that span. You and I did a long one after the Rose Bowl a couple of years ago? We were just sitting in a hotel at an airport somewhere. Well, I think it might have been the Rose Bowl. That might have been like 3 or 4 hours. Hey, listen, if there's stuff to talk about, we'll do a long live show. Listen, get all your friends to watch the post-game show after the Ohio State-Michigan game, and we'll go as long as you want us to. Keep those super chats rolling in. We'll go as long as you want us to. Win or lose, there will be plenty to talk about tomorrow, both about the game and then based on what happens in the game, what happens next is going to be real different and real interesting if they win or lose. So there'll be plenty to talk about there as well.
We talk about captive audiences. with live streams, it's basically a captor audience. You'll keep us there as long as you want us there. And at some point, it's like, can we go? Like, can we go? Can I go home and get some dinner and watch some football? No, we cannot. So that's fine.
Yeah, and we're in a spot where generally we can just kind of go as long as we want to go, more or less, because we're not generally we have found a spot finally where, for home games anyway, we're not in anyone else's way. We're not really annoying other people by being loud in the press box or any of that kind of stuff. So, and then if you want a reminder for the post game show, you can click on the link that was just thrown in the chat. Go ahead and open that up right now in a tab on your computer. It'll just sit there until it's post game show time, and then you can open it up and you can go. So we'll have, like I said, we'll have plenty to talk about tomorrow after the game. I'm going to roll through a couple of these questions. Lisa says, that's what I respect about you is you shoot it straight. Tell us the truth about the state of the Buckeyes. Love that, because I don't like not being told about the truth about the team. So thanks. So we appreciate that, Lisa. Appreciate you, all of you guys who have been popping in here. Appreciate you guys also who hit the thumbs up button. That helps other folks find these shows. You want us to do longer live shows. The more people that are in here, the longer the live show we do, the more you guys hit the thumbs up button, the more it gets shown to people, which means the more likes people are in here. So the more you hit the thumbs up button, not like clicking it a bunch of times, but the more of you who hit the thumbs up button. There we go. Got to spell it out sometimes. The longer these shows, it's like the small domino, big domino meme. Like small domino is I hit the thumbs up button. Big domino is Tom and Tony have to sit there and you can see their beards growing because they're sitting on a 15-hour live stream. So
the other thing is, Tom, if you tell somebody to hit the thumbs up and they hit it 45 times, they're actually only hitting it once.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yes.
Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up.
Yes. So you have to hit thumbs up, and then you have to open it on your spouse's device and leave the stream going there and hit the thumbs up there. And if your kids have a tablet,
iPad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Do that. Yeah. Listen, whatever you got to take, whatever you got to do, we appreciate it. Jax Tico says score prediction if Michigan plays like it did against Northwestern and if Ohio State plays like it did against Nebraska. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So
I started that one time. I saw that one. I was like, ooh, yeah, that's an interesting one.
That is an interesting one. So if Michigan plays like it did against Northwestern and Ohio State plays like it did against Nebraska. So the issue that Ohio State had against Nebraska was they were keeping things real vanilla in the run game. Like they ran a lot of I think it was inside zone that they ran a bunch of times in that game. And you had Zen Mahalski playing left tackle who was not having a good day. And the offensive line was sort of the reshuffled offensive line. And it wasn't like Nebraska was just marching up and down the field against the defense. It was just the offense just couldn't get out of first gear. If the way that looks against Michigan is the Michigan defensive line has a dominant day and you're completely shutting down the Ohio State run game and you're getting to Will Howard and you're shutting them down. Michigan playing like they did against Northwestern. I mean, we rewatched that game for the Michigan Monday segment this week. They scored 50 points and I'm like, man, I can't wait to watch this game. I wonder how differently they played. And it was like, no, it was just the same game. They just had a bunch of short fields because Northwestern's offense couldn't do anything. And Northwestern's defense isn't particularly great this year. And they just, they scored, what was the stat? They had one drive over 60 yards and they scored 50 points.
One drive over 65 yards. And like several drives of between 45 and 65. And really the only difference in Michigan in that game was that they had a couple of big runs, one over 50 from Kalel Mullings, because that had kind of gone away. Donovan Edwards, his last two carries went for 44 yards total, a 24 and a 20. So they were able to do that. Even Tavier Dunlap, their fourth string running back, scored on a 20-yard touchdown run at the end. So this was something we haven't seen from them in a while, and I think it's easy enough to chalk that up to Northwestern rather than Michigan. So basically, if Ohio State just tackles the first time, then they should be okay. And but if they play like they did against Nebraska, which was even against Nebraska, the defense gave up 270 yards of total offense. If they hold Michigan to 270 yards of total offense and 4.7 yards per play, I think is what Nebraska had. That's fine, and the offense would just need the same 21 that they got against Nebraska to win that one.
Yeah, I think that's a very nerve-wracking game for Ohio State if they play like they did against Nebraska and Michigan plays like they did against Northwestern. that's still a game Ohio State could win. It's not a game Ohio State's guaranteed to win. It's probably a very close game. And when you have a close game, those are games that, you're one bounce away from losing, or one call away from losing, or one whatever from losing. But it's still a game that Ohio State, that's not Michigan definitely wins this game if those two things happen. It's that game's close, and it's a game that goes either way. And you could certainly see that. I mean, you and I did a show about what would it take for Michigan to win the game, and it's like, there's a plausible path for Michigan to win this game. They're a 3-touchdown underdog, which is, the implied odds on that are in the mid 90s or so. Really, it feels like with this game being this game, it's probably not quite that high. It's probably more in the 85 to 90-ish range. But if you're a 90% chance, 90% favorite to win the game, that still means that one time out of 10, a bunch of stuff goes the other team's way and they win the game. Like, there are no 100% games in college football, no matter what anyone wants to tell you. So, and that kind of goes to Sue's question here, which is, I have to ask, do you want to win the Big Ten and then have to play Georgia in round 1, or lose and get the easy path 5th seed? I'm presuming the field as it stands. It's a hypothetical. So this is an interesting question. This is actually something we got asked about on our board earlier, and that was more of a broad conversation. Generally, your answer is always going to be you want to play fewer games, just because if you play a team, you have a chance to lose. Even if you're a 3-touchdown favorite, you have a chance to lose. And Ohio State against, I think the field as it stands right now, they would play Arizona State in the first round, and then Boise State in the quarterfinals in the Fiesta Bowl as the field stands right now. Obviously, that's not going to be how it actually plays out. But would you rather play Arizona State at home and Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl, or would you rather play no one and then play Georgia in the Rose Bowl? And this one's a little more of a complicated answer, because I ran the numbers just based on sort of general matchups. If you're a 21-point favorite, I don't know how it's about a 21-point favorite against both Boise State and Arizona State. If you run the numbers, you're north of a 95% win probability there. And, I think whatever extra credit you want to give Michigan for it's the Ohio State-Michigan game, I think you're probably giving Arizona State less credit for it's a team from Tempe, Arizona playing in Columbus, Ohio in December. So it's probably better than 95%. But Arizona State and Boise State, give them both a 95% win probability for Ohio State. That's about a 90% win probability that you win both of those. 0.95 times 0.95 is 0.90 and some change. So figure you're about 90% to win those two games. The win probability for to get to a 90% is about a 17-point favorite. So if you're just looking purely on paper, would you rather play, 2 games or play 1 game? 2 games as a 21-point favorite, or 1 game as a what favorite? The point where those lines cross is about a 17-point favorite. So is Ohio State a 17-point favorite against Georgia this year? Probably not. What are they, a 10-point favorite? I mean, maybe more, not that much.
6.5, 7. I don't know.
6.5, 7.5. Okay. So, at that point, you might want to just play the 1. I think the actual answer is somewhere south of 17, because there's an advantage to not playing an extra game and risking people getting hurt. If someone breaks their leg in the Arizona State game and then you don't have them moving forward, guess what? You're better off having not played that game. So, there is a point somewhere probably between a 7-point favorite in that second round as a number 1 versus the number 8, and a 17-point favorite. Like there's probably a point at which that line crosses for every individual coach and where their risk tolerance is. I know that was a lot of numbers, but the answer for Georgia is, if you tell me right now, 100% certainty the field is going to stay as exactly as it is, you'd probably rather play those 2 games, probably, because you're more likely to beat both of those teams than you are to just beat Georgia, having to just play 1 game head to head. But there's a million different ways. Indiana could be the 8 seed, or Tennessee could be the 8 seed, where you probably are a 13, 14-point favorite, something like that. And at that point, I think it's a much, much more involved conversation, whether you're going to have that, which side of that matchup you choose. And here's the other thing. If you lose the Big Ten championship game, there's no guarantee you're the 5th seed. Mm-hmm. Like if they go in and they lose close, you lose to Oregon by, you lose another 31-28 game. Yeah, you're almost certainly the 5 seed. No, they're not dropping you behind anyone else at that point. If you go in and lose by 10 points, you might be the 6th seed. And if you're the 6th seed, all of a sudden, well, then those matchups are no longer quite so advantageous. So you're playing a dangerous game if you're trying to really, like you're being, I would rather have the 5 seed. Like, well, maybe, but there's a lot of ifs and ands there.
Well, if people are wanting to avoid the SEC, there's no guarantee that you're not going to have one of those 3-loss talented SEC teams sneak in there at 12, and somehow that's who you're opening up with. I also think there's something to if this were to stay the way it is, and I don't know that it even can, but the idea of Georgia and Oregon having to face off against each other, then Ohio State having the opportunity to play one of those teams after those two teams have played, I think not only does it give you great film, other than the fact that Ohio State already has some good film on Oregon, but those are going to be two tough heavyweight bouts. You're talking about two of the 3 most talented teams in the nation facing off against each other, and Ohio State just sits back, having played 2 games, but essentially it was like, okay, we'll see who comes out, and whoever comes out probably will be a little bit banged up for having won the game. So I think there's also a sneaky benefit to that kind of thing where, sure, you have to play an extra game, but I think the opponent that you get coming out of that 8-9 then 1 is that could be a favorable matchup for Ohio State as well. This is the only bracket that we've gotten to see with Ohio State like at 5, Oregon at 1, and then that 8-9 thing. It's like I don't think that's how it's going to end up. And can Ohio State and Oregon separate themselves and get on opposite sides of the bracket, because they're just continually being married to each other in all of these projections, and maybe that takes an Ohio State losing and going to 6, because I think if Oregon loses, they're at 5, barring a 52-0 or something like that, which I don't see, because I don't think they will penalize a conference championship game loss. I don't know that Oregon is going to be overly penalized for losing in Indianapolis to Ohio State or Penn State. I don't even know who is
Ohio State. Oregon is already in, so
right.
So Ohio State, or I think Penn State is ahead of Indiana. So it would take Penn State losing. It would take for Indiana to get there. I think Ohio State and Penn State would both have to lose, I believe, in order to get Indiana into the Big Ten championship game. So, and then if all 3 teams lose, I think Ohio State might still go. If Ohio State loses to Michigan and Penn State loses to Maryland and Indiana loses to Purdue. And if you think that's going to happen, I would strongly encourage you to put a 3-team money line parlay on Purdue and Maryland and Michigan. I don't know what that – we need to get the guys from Wager Wire on here to tell us the 3-team parlay for Tony's. Tony is hard at work.
I'll bring it up for you.
3-team parlay. I'm going to guess plus 5,000. We'll see if I'm right. Terry says Terry is hoping Georgia Tech beats Georgia. I mean, that's certainly you want to talk about changing what the playoff looks like. If Georgia Tech beats Georgia, Georgia's still in the SEC championship game. But boy, if they don't, if they win, then they're going to be probably the 2 or the 3 seed. And then if they lose the SEC championship game, they're out. I mean, there's no way you could keep them in at that point. You have the possibility of a complete anarchy weekend in the SEC. If Georgia Tech beats Georgia, if Clemson beats South Carolina, if Auburn beats Alabama, I mean, you have all these different teams. And there was someone else. I mean, if Ole Miss loses to Mississippi State, you've got all these teams playing these rivalry games this weekend. And if some of them, if a bunch of them go against the SEC, you could theoretically have as few as 2 SEC teams in there. I'm certainly not expecting that. That's Mike Ferguson says Tony is running numbers from his days as a loan shark.
No. So Tom, do you want to know what that would pay out? Just the 3-team money line parlay of Michigan winning, Maryland winning, and Purdue winning on a $10 bet.
I'm gonna say, I'll say $500.
$41,850.
So, friends, if I'm not advising you to do this, but if you do bet it, you are contractually obligated to give me half of your money if you win. So that's price that in.
I'm looking at this now. I can't afford to send this bet in now. Like I've already got the $10 right there, just waiting. And that's without applying any bonuses or whatever. I could probably jack this up I'll make this a $5 bet and jack it up to 60,000 or something. But let's go ahead and get rid of that.
Yeah, that's boy, yeah, I'm not expecting that, but if these trends continue, hey, yeah, there are certainly some interesting games to watch this weekend outside of the Buckeyes and Wolverines. But this goes back to what we've talked about, where the new college football playoff format is going to kill all interest in the sport, and it's going to be terrible. And feels like a lot of people are interested in watching college football right now. Feels like there's a lot more teams for whom there are things on the line this weekend than there were in previous seasons.
We don't even know we know what we don't know. It's like we don't know what this bracket is going to look like. Every game affects the standings, and it's like, well, now this team is the favorite. Now this team needs this to happen. I have no idea what what all of the conference championship game situations look like at this moment in terms of is Colorado in? Have they wrapped up a bid in the Big 12 championship game against Arizona State? Is Arizona State, have they wrapped it up, or do they have to? I assume they have Arizona this weekend. Is Arizona going to be able to keep them out of it? There are so many of the rivalry games right now where those. Oh no,
Tony. Good news, Tony. I still have the Big 12 flow chart on hand. So here's if Colorado wins, there are ways that Colorado still does not make the Big 12 championship game. I don't even know which of these games has happened yet and has not happened yet. But yeah, I mean, if you look at the Colorado side of it, there are 4 different scenarios, 4 different combinations of results from the the Kansas, Baylor, West Virginia, Texas Tech, Arizona State, Kansas State, Iowa State, and Houston and BYU games. There's 4 different combinations of results from those that would result in Colorado winning this week and still not making it into the college football, into the Big 12 championship game. So that's I haven't even looked at the score of that game. Goodness, is that even happening today? I haven't.
Which one?
Colorado, is that today?
Yeah, they're up 45-0 in the fourth.
Oh, so they're probably going. So it feels like they're probably going to win. Okay, Boise State up 27-18. They're up 2 scores in the fourth. So yeah, a couple games there. Goodness, yeah, it's boy, Colorado is one of those teams, Tony, that if Colorado is the 4 seed, that's one where personally, at that point, I am rooting for Ohio State to get the 5 seed, because then we get to go cover a Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter hype fest there. And let me tell you, if you've watched Colorado along the lines, I think that might be a favorable matchup for Ohio State in the places where games tend to get decided. So, that's a game where we get a week of exciting press conferences and lots of big audiences, and probably also get to cover a college football playoff semifinal and as well.
Yeah, we get to meet some Colorado fans. Colorado does pretty well on YouTube, putting in the tags on the back end of these YouTube videos, and you'll see, would you like to mention that you're talking about Colorado in here? It's like, well, I'm not, but I could. Colorado pretty popular, Deion pretty popular on the old YouTube there.
Mike Ferguson says that was just the inside of my brain as a flow chart. Which, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of college football rattling around in there. That is certainly true. One of our viewers would prefer to see Michigan beat Ohio State to beat Michigan, Oregon, and either Tennessee or Georgia, and whoever in the national championship game. I mean, listen, if you tell Ohio State fans you're going to win the national championship, who would you like to go through? I'm sure a path of, you beat Michigan, you win the Big Ten, and you beat 3 SEC teams in a row, boom, 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 in the college football playoff. I'm sure that would be the path that people would choose just for the opportunity to chant SEC multiple times at the end of a bowl game. But also, I mean, that's if you have, frankly, it's more interesting to see teams play when they haven't already played that season. We're going to see potentially Ohio State and Oregon play twice. There is a certain amount of intrigue around a team. I don't know that anyone's ever played 3 times in a season, so that would be kind of interesting. But also, I also would kind of not mind seeing someone else at some points. The other thing that goes into this, and we haven't really talked about this in the context of the playoff, is are you going to be fresh if you are the team that has the bye and you're going into New Year's Day without having played since the Big Ten championship game? Or are you going to be rusty and the team that played 10 days before, are they fresh? Are they ready to go and really in rhythm, or are they beaten up and battered and bruised? And we've never seen this format before where one team is going to have 10 days off and one team's going to have 20 something days off. I mean, this is all very new. And, that's when we have this 1 versus 5 conversation, there is a lot of information that we don't have. That's one of those things where if you watch baseball, how often does a team cruise through the regular season? They get a bye, they're off like 5 days, and then they come back and they look like they've never played baseball before, and then they get knocked out of the NLDS or ALDS. It happens all the time.
Well, and I'll tell you, from what we've heard, Georgia wants no part of the SEC championship game, so they don't mind playing in that first round and not getting that bye and just going through that. A lot of teams don't want to be. Well, now Georgia being in a situation where if they lose in the SEC championship game, they might be done entirely, so that might cloud their thinking. But I think it just depends on the team, where you're at. What do you need? Do you need to get healthy? Do you need a week off? Because you still get time off. It's like 10 games between games if you're playing, or I just think that might be a long layoff for a team that would get a bye. But I don't think a coach is going to turn it down. Like, you know what? Somebody want our spot, we'll take it. We'll go play.
Yeah, that's one of those things where the coaches are always going to default to, I would rather not play that first round, yet just have a bye into the second round and not put yourself at risk, put your players' health at risk, put your team at risk of a loss in that first round. That's just kind of what coaches are always going to default to for the most part. So yes, and I think that's important context around the Georgia thing. Georgia knows they're in right now as long as they beat Georgia Tech today. But if they lose if they lose to Georgia Tech, they're out. Then they really will want to play in the SEC championship game. It feels like the conference championship games are like 7 days and some hours away at this point. And there's still so much that needs to be settled over that next 7 days and some change, because things are going to change a lot over the course of that next week. And Tony, when people want to know what's going on over the course of that week, including early signing day, Tony, where should they go to get that information?
You can get all of that at BuckeyeHuddle.com, where you sign up right now for a premium membership. First month, just $4.99. So you can sign up for a year if you want as well. But join up, say hello to us there on the message board. We've got stuff going on behind the scenes, behind the paywall, talking about what we're hearing. We don't share everything here, talking about recruiting, team coverage, all of those things, and just, a community to talk Ohio State with, and a friendly, politics-free community.
Yes, a friendly, politics-free, he said again, community. Yes, and we are actually doing an all-day staff chat there. So if you want to keep talking to us today, well, that's a great place to do it on the Huddle Board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And if you want to hear us talk more about football, oh, friends, do I have good news for you. We will have our usual pregame show. I think we're going to try and do a live show. We may have time to do a little bit of an extended live show on Saturday morning from Ohio Stadium. We're going to be indoors. The plan is to be indoors. I sure hope we're indoors. We'll be doing a live show Saturday morning. Make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Make sure you hit the bell so you get notified when we do those live shows. Go ahead and open up that post-game show right now. Just open up a tab. You are not going to want to miss that post-game show. Boy, is there going to be a lot to talk about there at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Whether the Buckeyes win or the Buckeyes lose, emotions are going to be running high in the old capital city of the state of Ohio on Saturday afternoon, right around 3:30. we would love to have you there with us to talk about all of it and then talk about what's next, whether that's a trip to Indianapolis or a long and uncomfortable wait for the college football playoff selection show. We will be there, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, immediately after the game. As long as you're interested in watching us and keep those view numbers up, we will be there at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, and of course at buckeyehuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.